This is Telling the Story, a podcast dedicated to exploring faith, spirituality, arts, and culture, hosted by Ninth Hour Theatre Company in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for joining us for our podcast series discussing the themes and ideas expressed in the beloved story of Babette's Feast by Danish author Karen Blixen. Throughout the series, we'll talk with artists and special topical guests discussing things such as refuge and sanctuary, the art of hospitality, the importance of cultural exchange, beauty and pleasure, and the power of living in community. What makes our podcast unique is that you'll also get an insider's look at the many artistic and production decisions that are made in putting together a theatrical production as we rehearse a new play adaptation of Babette's Feast. So sit back and settle in for a stimulating dive into deep ideas and the world of theater magic. I'm so excited for this episode in which we're going to be discussing the power of living in community and how it relates to the story of Babette's Feast. I'm your host, Charlie, and I'm joined today by two awesome guests, two returning guests to the Telling the Story podcast. In fact, I'm joined by KELTIE NEWMARCH. KELTIE is one of the performing artists in the upcoming production of Babette's Feast. She's excited to return to Ninth Hour Theatre Company. She was previously performed as a puppeteer of the puppet Aslan in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in 2023 with Ninth Hour, and she contributed to the development of the original theatrical piece Frankenstein AI in 2025. Other credits for KELTIE include Samson and Delilah and Anna Green Gables. KELTIE enjoys exploring meaningful stories through theater and cherishes the collaboration that comes from building a show and sharing live performance with artists and audiences alike. Welcome, KELTIE.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here again.
Wonderful. And I'm also joined by George Dutch. George is no stranger to the Telling the Story podcast. George is Ninth Hour's Associate Artistic Director. He studied acting at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver with internationally renowned theatre director Gunduz Kalik during the 70s. Then joined Kalik's Ensemble in Northern Australia for 5 years, where he taught a performance class in a university theatre program during the 80s. In 2024, George adapted Mary Shelley's novel into a play called Frankenstein AI, with which KELTIE also helped develop, which was further developed, of course, by Ninth Hour in 2025. Throughout 2020 to 2024, George provided editorial and dramaturgical support for the company's original work and audio drama, Beauty Will Save the World. George thinks theater should investigate big ideas related to the role of culture in shaping everyday practices of living. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, two great people to talk about this awesome subject about community and, of course, the power of living in community, the challenges that go with that. What kinds of communities are out there, different types. I'm looking forward to hearing some of your personal experiences living in community as well. But let us start first by talking about the word community. It's a word that's tossed around a lot. We use it a lot in everyday speech. We often refer to people groups and subgroups of society as a community, like the cycling community, the queer community, the Christian community, the podcast community. Like, we're always referring to these groups as communities, and I've heard and what do we mean by that? Are these in fact communities in the way that the word community has been traditionally used, as being bonded together with shared values, purposes, perhaps? And then, so I find it fascinating, and I've definitely read articles and heard news stories in which it starts to get a bit ridiculous. Perhaps I would almost argue, where the use of the word community is like sort of like the skateboarding by the ocean while wearing sunglasses community. Like it starts to get like really kind of funny, where it gets really, 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 really specific. Mm-hmm. And then you think to yourself, wow, are all the people skateboarding by the ocean while wearing sunglasses getting together annually for a conference? Are they really a community? Yeah, maybe they are. We don't know. So I do find it funny and interesting how we've used the word community. And I guess I push back on it slightly, that often we're using the word community, but that's not really what we mean. Like, what are your thoughts on that, KELTIE?
Yeah, I do think we use community super broadly. And the way I think of it is there's almost macro community, and macro community would be queer community, community of women in Ottawa. But that doesn't mean I know every single woman in Ottawa, and I'm not getting together with every single woman in Ottawa. And we use the macro title of community, I think, when we're actually referring to identity and shared identity. But when I think of community, or when I say my community, I actually mean the people that I'm living with daily or weekly or monthly, people who know me, they know about the stage of life I'm in, the seasons of life I'm in, as basic as what it is I do throughout my days, how I spend my time, and as complex or as intimate as how I feel throughout my days. I would say generally that's what I mean when I refer to my community. And that's more of the micro definition of community. So
kind of like the people in your life, the people you relate to, right? Right.
I think it helps to go back to the root of the word. Yeah. Communis is the root of community. It's the Latin root for the word for common. It simply means common. And so we use community broadly in that sense. Whatever we have a commonality with another group of people or other individuals with, we call it community. I mean, literally community, we use it because we share a common space, a place, right? We're the community of Ottawa. In the story of Babette's feast, the community is in a physical location called
Berlevåg.
Right, in northern Norway. And within that physical location or that community, which has a name, there's a group of people that are part of a Lutheran sect. And they're a community of believers in a certain theology or a way of living because they share that. That's in common. They have common interests, common beliefs, common practices. So this skateboard community that wears sunglasses
by the
down
ocean
in Southern California by the ocean, they have a common interest. So broadly speaking, we can fairly call them a community, I think.
Interesting. Yeah. So in other words, we are perhaps using it we are using it correctly. It just has so many different. There's just so many different kinds of community and connotations. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Would the word also be related to like commune, communicate? Same root. Yeah. Communist, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Same root. Okay.
Right. They had a shared belief system and a shared set of group practices.
Right. So that's it. So, okay. So some communities have in common maybe appearance. Some have interests in common. The knitting community of Ottawa or whatever. The theater community. We often refer to the theater community. So like we have shared interests, and then there's and then you can have communities based on visible characteristics, and you can have communities based on shared values or beliefs, I guess, as well, right? Yeah.
Or activities. For example, Ottawa is the traits or the characteristics of Ottawa also define it, given an identity. That it's a public service city. That it's the city that Fun for God. By reputation, there's a community element to Ottawa.
Yeah, Keltie, let me ask you: what are the aspects of community that we see in Babette's feast? Like what, in other words, why this topic, and how does it relate to Babette's feast in your opinion?
Like George said, it is about a small town that is run by a dean who leads an ecclesiastic sect, a Lutheran sect. And so there is.
And you play one of the sisters.
Yes, I do play one of his daughters. So after he dies, my sister and I, we take over. Excuse me.
It's okay. Yeah, you take over so after the sort of the patriarch of the community passes, you and the characters that you play, you and the sister, you sort of take over. You don't take over. It kind of falls on your characters to continue to run the community.
And tell us their names, because that's significant in terms of the community.
So I play Martine, who's named after Martin Luther, and then my sister Philippa is named after his friend Philip Mellington, who were both Lutheran. Martin Luther is the father of the Lutheran Protestantism, but then also the Lutheran Church is named after Martin Luther. And then Philip Mellington is a cose friend of his who I'd
never heard of before.
Yeah, me neither. Not until the play.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I learned that in Denmark. So the author is Danish, Karen Blixen or Isaac Dinesen, depending on how you know them, is Danish, and Danish does have a state religion, which is Lutheranism.
That's right.
So I found that to be interesting.
Yeah. So the town of Berlevåg is teeny weeny, and it was something that would connect everyone is the shared belief that the Lutheran Protestant tradition is the tradition to follow. And there would be other things. It's a fishing community, which when you're working and living off the land, that can be really bonding. But the idea of community is really important because when you are small and isolated or living quite rurally, I think you rely on your community or that which is common. And, if someone in your community is hurt, then you try to help them. Everyone's pitching in to keep this community alive. But specifically with Babette's feast, this tiny community is tight knit because it's just them in, the north of
They're
Norway.
isolated.
They're isolated.
Barren northern wasteland.
It's frozen.
Ice and snow.
Right.
Yeah.
And the ocean right beside them.
Yeah. And there's a way of life that everyone seems to agree works, and they're committed to following that or trying to follow that. And then someone new is introduced to the community. And while she does have some things in common with them, there are a lot of differences, the opposite of common.
She's from Paris, France. She's
from
a famous
Paris.
chef.
She's a disruptor.
She's a disruptor.
And she's not the first.
Catholic.
Is she the first guest? She's not the first outsider at this community. She's like the last in a sense, right? Like there's some others that came before her, right? And she only found out about the community from them, right?
Yeah. But they were visitors. She really joined the community.
She becomes a resident.
Yes. She moves in. She says, this is also going to be my community now. I'm going to live here.
She says it. She makes that intention, you mean? Or
they say, well, you can rest here for a bit, but you can't live here. And she says, if you send me away, I must die.
Oh, right. She does say that. Right. She has no choice but to stay. Yeah.
She's saying, I'm here. I'm staying.
And by the end of the play, she recommits to staying there as well.
Yeah, she does. Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful. And they take her in, like the community. They
take her in. But it's very interesting because she comes in. It's clear there are differences, theological differences. She's Roman Catholic in a Lutheran community. The community is quite ascetic. They practice a lot of self-denial and simplicity in the name of God. And she's from the big city. She's from Paris. She
speaks a different language.
She speaks a different language. Yeah. She's a chef. She's a luxury chef, which no one knows.
Right.
But there are a lot of differences. And they do welcome her in, but almost without getting curious about who she really is and what her background is. And eventually the story is they slowly learn.
Basically, they suffer her.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because their whole way of life is about suffering. It's about self-denial.
Yeah.
It's about impoverishment.
They put up with it. They tolerate it.
Yeah.
No,
because they're trying to comply or obey the law, right? They're about compliance with the law as the Lutheran in Lutheran tradition.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she comes and disrupts all that.
But subtly and slowly. She doesn't come in and say, I'm going to cook French food. She comes in and says, I can cook. And the Lutheran sisters say, but we'll teach you how to cook. Not really.
And she takes a submissive posture to the sisters, doesn't she?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. Like she brings to the community certain gifts, and they don't know. Maybe they're not curious enough to ask or know, or maybe they don't know any better. And it's just interesting that when someone's added to the community, literally in this sense, like you never know what you're getting and how they can shape the community or grow the community or maybe sometimes destroy the community, maybe not intentionally even. And I find it too interesting about communities. There's different ways of like belonging. Like there's sort of like belong first, then like
there's tremendous pressure to integrate right, to the dominant culture or the way of living in that community.
Yeah.
You don't come in flamboyantly and disrupt everything in an outrageous way. Babette comes in and tries to fit in as best she can, and it's not easy for her.
And they're taking her in. It would be rude to criticize their way of life. Like, who are you, the one just arriving, to be like, what are you people doing? The word unity is in the word community. Does the unity of that Lutheran community in Babette's feast, does it sustain after the passing of the patriarch?
That's a really good question, because I think it does in theory, but in practice, the unity does not sustain. There are some scenes where people are cheating one another, stealing from one another, and getting in conflict over it, and turning to the dean's daughters to help them resolve the conflict. And the daughters are a little bit like, trust in each other and in the Lord. Hopefully that'll work out. They're relying on the rules to maybe encourage behavior. But ultimately at the end, so the pinnacle of the show is there's this large feast, but that's given permission by her mistresses, Martine and Philippa, to cook for and host a feast for the whole village in celebration of their father's 100th birthday. And at this feast, people are sitting, they're communing together, and the people who have conflict with one another resolve their arguments through sharing food and sharing drink. So the when the dean dies, there is a shift in leadership, and it's not an easy transition for the community, because I think people are looking for the same thing that the dean offers, but only the dean can offer what the dean offers.
Yeah, that's why it's so hard to maintain or sustain unity, right? That's why we have lots of rules around maintaining unity. Sometimes they're legal, law and order. Sometimes they're social rules or traditions or religious rules that you have to follow, because unity at some point, second law of thermodynamics, it gets frayed, right? Things break apart. That sort of seems to be the natural order of things. They decay or break apart, or disorder becomes the natural order of things. So it's not surprising that their unity is frayed after the dean dies.
But when unity frays, you can repair. So I'm a counselor, and there's an idea in counseling where you can rupture an alliance with someone that you're working with, whether or not you've said something that hurts them, vice versa. And when there is a rupture in your alliance or in your unity, once you repair, you actually can become stronger, and it can be something that happens that ultimately fosters resilience and connection between the two of you when working together. And so the unity that the dean was fostering, yes, I do really think it became frayed. But once this dinner happened, there was a strength, right? The rupture of one person stealing sugar from another, they're arguing about it, and then they forgive one another. What a profound thing to happen, right? That fosters resilience and connection between the two people who are arguing, which is going to serve them.
I like what you said, like that, like a rupture, but if it's actually dealt with through accountability and forgiveness, real forgiveness, not, I forgive you, but, it's actual accountability. Yes, it can totally, I could see what you mean by like that relationship's now even stronger than it ever was before, because we've gotten over this. So what can't we do together? What can't we get over, until you can't again, right? Until no more,
Till the next one.
Till the next one. Yeah. The next rupture, Yeah. In
some ways you have to pivot or reinvent yourself or use some kind of strategy to become stronger as a result of the rupture.
Yeah.
Do you think by definition community, and I want to come back. I want to come back to on the word commune after this question that I was just thinking of. Do you think community by definition has to be exclusive? Like it can't be a feel good, all are welcome thing, because there are norms and rules and shared values. Like if, you can't go into the skateboarding by the ocean, sunglass wearing community if you hate sunglasses and don't wear sunglasses. Well, by definition, it's the sunglass wearing, skateboarding by the ocean community. But also just like eventually even through restoring relationships. Like eventually at some point do you have to kick someone out? Like, do you have to not take them in because they're a disruption to the community? What do you guys think? Or is community it meant to be inclusive no matter what? Like, are there limits? Can it be? Yeah. What do you think? And who gets to decide? I mean, the community gets to decide, I guess, right? Like, do you have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
I have a thought about that. There was a movie made of this story. It was a novella, a short story, basically, or a novella. And then it became a movie, and now it's a play that we're doing. Mm-hmm. And in the movie, one of the things that struck me, I saw it when it, I think in 1990, a couple of years after it came out, and I was much younger then. And what struck me about the movie, it's a movie of and about old people. There's no children in the movie.
Yeah, you're right.
And even in the play, there's only a young server that helps Babette during the feast, but he's a young adult. But in the movie, you don't see any children. So there was this implication that the community was on the verge of dying out.
Extinction,
because people weren't having children. And we know that the sisters, for example, even though they were, they had suitors, that they never married, they never reproduced, they never had children. So this community seems to be on the edge of extinction because people aren't reproducing. So there's no way to carry on the traditions of the community. So if I think a community has to be open to change, because change tends to occur from the margins that move towards the center rather than the center moving out to the margins, right? There's a kind of exclusivity there. The center doesn't deliberately move out to the margins and incorporate strangers. Okay?
Right. I see what your point is. It's the
strangers that sort of that stand on the margins and move into the center and change that over time.
It's the Babettes that enter and transform from the inside out. Yeah.
Oh, I think you're totally right. Yeah. I like what you said. The central core, whatever those people are, they're not desperately going to seek out the people that are different or strange or don't
even
belong.
In this story where their community is on the edge of extinction, and it faces a serious
existential threat.
Yeah. That's the way to put it. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Yeah. What do you think, Keltie, about that? This communities being exclusive or inclusive or everything George was saying, all that good stuff.
I mean, the definition of communist is that which is common, right? And so I think that if we're sticking to that definition, let's say what is this? The sunglasses wearing, skateboard riding by the beach, by the ocean community.
And it could be anywhere, not one specific geographical location.
Yeah. And I think as long as you are a skateboard riding, sunglasses wearing person by an ocean, you are in theory a part of that community because you have that in common. But I do think that communing with people who are also that way does depend on lots of variables, right? Like you're asking, do we need to exclude people? Do we need to set boundaries or whatever? I think sometimes that happens naturally, right? Just because I'm a skateboard riding, sunglasses wearing person by the ocean doesn't mean that I'm communing well and getting along well with the two of you who are also skateboard riding, sunglass wearing people who skateboard by the ocean, right? I think that we
could have nothing else in common but that.
Yeah. And I think that will naturally result in exclusion or separation. Just because we have things in common doesn't mean that we will build like consistent, active, daily community. Personal.
I mean, there are communities that are exclusive. You know, we can think of Orthodox Jews or Amish. Or, there are communities that provide strict boundaries. And, you know, if you want to leave the community, like the Amish allow their young people to leave the community and have to make a decision within a year, whatever it is, right? You either come back and then you're committed for life, or you leave. And after a certain period of time, you have to make the choice. Are you going to return or stay outside this community for the rest of your life?
Right.
So there are exclusionary mechanisms that are at work in certain communities.
And I was thinking too, just about like all the uses of the word of community that we're talking about today and all the uses of that word. Like there are communities that maybe what it is, it's actually quite superficial what bonds that community, you know, like this skateboarder by the ocean that likes to wear sunglasses. There's a superficiality to it because there's so much about a person that's way more complex than just likes to wear sunglasses and skateboards by the ocean. Yeah. So I find, but that's still a community, as we've all agreed that that's still a community. And I've certainly been part of many communities in all senses of the word in my life, like, you know, physical, literal communities versus just the sort of like identity based communities, I guess you could say, where some are more deeper than others. Like, have you gone through the same things, maybe the same struggles or challenges in life bonds you as a community? You know, maybe what bonds you as a community is this deep belief in like God or the divine, or a sense of faith or a sense of you know, you're part of something great in history. It's been around a long time, that sort of thing. So like I get, and some communities just last longer and go deeper than others because there's a superficiality to it. Like, you know, there's aspects about ourselves that are superficial, like, you know, blue-eyed community is kind of like a superficial thing to have a community about, in my opinion. Whereas something like what you believe, like when it comes to faith or spirituality, is one of the more deeper shared bonds, you know, and then there's lots in between, I would argue. I mean, I'm open to pushback on it, but I feel like there's layers of what you would commune about, I suppose. And I want to go back to that word, if you don't mind. Like, what does it mean to commune? What does it mean to commune with others? What does it mean to commune generally? What do you guys think?
Well, I think the word means to gather, a group of people gather together around a common interest or a common belief or a common activity. It's a gathering of people, a coming together of people, becoming one, commune, becoming one around a belief or an activity or
But is there a relational,
tradition,
spiritual thing happening that communing a higher than just coming together, like coming together to knit? Are you necessarily communing that you physically showed up, or is communing something more? I'm just asking. Yeah. What do you think?
I think it can be, depending on the participants and, you know, what their goals and objectives and needs and priorities are for the group. That there can be a spiritual dimension to it, if you like, but
or relational.
But again, I think it depends on the composition of the group and, you know, what is this common interest or belief or tradition or activity that they're gathering around.
Or even the individual too, right? Let's stick with the knitting community example. Let's say I knit, but I never knew anyone else who knit, and I loved it. I had this real passion for knitting and creating through knitting. And I didn't know anyone else felt the same way. And I was invited to a gathering where everyone else really enjoyed knitting. And technically all we're doing is getting together and knitting. But the impact on me as someone who was originally lonely in this passion of mine is that, I'm not actually alone anymore. I have a shared interest with lots of other people. I get to talk about what I enjoy. I don't need to do any sort of work or have the mental load of needing to explain what it is about knitting that I love, because you get it. And that's so special. And really, the behavior is just getting together and knitting, but the impact is deeply personal and is as powerful as someone who was lonely in their passion and is no longer lonely in their passion. And I think that is a spiritual experience, but really all that's happened is we got together and we knit.
Excellent point. Right. So even if there was no intentionality of bonding and forming relationships, or even getting together to necessarily reduce someone's loneliness, like there's no intention to do that, but there's an effect regardless. There can be an effect regardless of the intent, I suppose.
Almost something magical or mysterious that it's greater than the sum of its parts. The experience for you is greater than the sum of its parts. And there is a kind of mystery or magic or communal euphoria in that.
And really all we did was sit in a circle and knit and talk about knitting. But there's something deeper. And I think conversely, I think of religious gatherings, a church gathering where all of you are coming together in a room for a shared purpose, which in theory is to worship God. But then but then I don't necessarily, my beliefs don't align, but I'm there. And what's happening is the opposite. I don't feel that sense of community. I may even feel a sense of isolation, right? This sense of alienation, which could, I guess, be seen as a spiritual experience, but it is othering. It is doing the opposite of making me feel as though I'm a part of something.
And even if there's no intent to make you feel othered or alienated, it could still have that effect on you because, I mean, I'm not going to lie. That's a lot of my life. Like I've been in so many places where I'm there. It's important to be in community, but I feel existentially alone anyway. Like I just feel alienated for all sorts of reasons. And not that people are necessarily trying to alienate me. You're just, I don't know, you just think differently, or there's something about you that's liminal and maybe you don't quite fully fit the mold there. And many could argue that's a great way to live. That's a great person to be. But there is a sense of that alienation I find in communities because it never quite fits. It never quite feels like home, that you can truly be myself.
But something draws you there, right?
But something does.
This little conversation is reminding me of an experience I had just in the last month. Yeah. Because I was on vacation in Croatia and I was in this city called Zadar, and it's right on the ocean. And every evening around 6 o'clock, just before the sun would go down in the next half hour, people from all over the world would collect at the edge of the ocean where there is a man-made structure. It's called an organ, a sea organ, where an artist has built holes in the seawall, deliberate holes in the seawall, so that when the waves and the water come in, it makes the sound like a church organ.
Oh, that's so cool.
But it depends on the size of the waves and the strength of the waves and the wind and all this kind of stuff. Wow. So it creates this church type atmosphere as the sun is going down, and hundreds, if not thousands of people gather to watch the sun go down and listen to this natural music. Whoa. So there's a kind, I think, there's something insanely human about it, because it doesn't draw the local dogs and the cats to watch the sun go down with this sea organ. Right. It's a human thing. There's a longing to connect with the transcendent, with other people. So I think that's an interesting aspect of communion. We come together as a collective to connect with not only each other, but with something transcendent. Thank you for reminding me of a lovely memory.
Wow. That sounds incredible.
That is incredible.
That's such a great point, right? Like we just want to, whether it be going to the game, right? And being in the stadium,
even if it's a disappointing experience or an underwhelming experience, because I have to admit, it felt a little underwhelming to me, but it was beautiful in a sense, because, people from all over the world, you'd hear all these different languages and people of different ages and colors and ethnicities. And it was beautiful.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. It sounds unexpected too. Like you wouldn't, which makes it even more beautiful. Like, what the heck is this? It's so rare. It's unique. It's unique, Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah.
It makes me think about how there seems to be something in, if not all, most of us that wants to feel like we have something in common with people around us, right? Imagine you discovered this organ, the sea, the artist made it. Two people in the world knew about it. It was the artist and you who discovered it. There would be something in you that would want to share it with other people so that they could experience this really cool artistic vision. So you're not enjoying it alone. There seems to be this innate urge in many, if not all of us, to share and to live, to be in community and to commune, whether or not the experience is underwhelming. Right?
Right. Yeah. Like it reminds me in the play of Babette's Feast that she invited people to her communion, right, to the feast. And they were reluctant to go, right? They were sort of, I don't know how reluctant they were, but they do express that they're reluctant and they're going to go, but they're not going to enjoy it.
That's right.
Yes.
They're not going to taste it.
It's almost sinful to go.
Not a word about the food.
Not a word, not a sound.
But they still go.
Yeah.
So there's something in them that, wants to go. There's a longing there to gather with people that they have something in common with and go through this experience together.
Whether or not it's because they're supporting Martine and Philippa, in any case, there's something in them that wants to go. And it ends up being a spiritual experience for all of them. Transformative, yeah.
And community could certainly be transformative, like for the good or the bad, but it shapes us. The communities we're part of, they shape us, good and bad, good experiences, bad experiences. They really shape us. But I love this idea of like, it's just like unexpected, I don't know, like things that bond us, the interconnectedness of these moments, like, like that when you're in a community, it's something surprising happens or something beautiful. I mean, as a theater company, I feel like we're like, I don't know, at least I do. I feel spoiled almost in a sense, like with regards to how meaningful and deep like our artistic process is, and the wonderful people involved with the discussions we have, and then just being embodied and embodying ideas and playing around with each other and experimenting the concepts and laughing and thinking and being moved. And there's just something about it that gives you shivers. Like, just, I don't know, like there's just certain, I think that's why a lot of people like theater, because there is something about it that's transcendent. There is something about it that is spiritual, and it could be the communing aspect of it. The audience, when they show up, they're communing now with the performers. The performers definitely are communing. And the sad part about theater art is it's temporary. The community of Babette's Feast is temporary. Once the show is over, that specific group of people will no longer get together. And that's what's actually quite challenging about theater. I find it's like temporary community after temporary community after temporary community. All the more reason to have some community in our life that transcends being part of a show, being part of a production, because it's temporary, it's fleeting.
Yeah,
but still meaningful nonetheless.
It is meaningful. And part of the meaning is there's real intimacy in in gathering together weekly. Right now we're gathering 3 times a week for over 4 hours with a shared goal, which is you're examining and creating this story together
and making it good for the audience,
and making mistakes in front of one another, succeeding in front of one another, exploring and getting curious about text in front of one another and with one another. There's real intimacy in it, which I think for myself, just personally, my personality is quite meaningful.
There's vulnerability too.
It's vulnerable, right? You're consistently vulnerable. And sometimes with these kinds of theater communities where you meet the cast day one and you're vulnerable right away because you dive in, right? That's really scary. Yeah. But when you are received with love and respect, it's incredibly profound, right? Like I am the version of KELTIE that I am in practice and rehearsal 3 days a week. The people that I rehearse with only see this version of KELTIE because they're the only people who can draw out this version of KELTIE. It's really quite an intimate and vulnerable experience, which is and
it's great
I'm
to
enjoying.
See you at rehearsal too. Like you're funny, you're emotive. Like it's just great. You're thoughtful. Like it adds so much. Like I think people underestimate their individual contribution to a community and how significant it is. I know for me, I'm always like, when someone's not there that day, like I feel the absence. I actually really do. Like I'm like, oh, we're impoverished to not have that person here today. That's how I feel. Yeah. And
it's unique about theater.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying. Every time you recast a show, it's a new group. And you'll never be able to replicate it, even if you got every single person who was in Babette's Feast to be in the next performance. It'll be a different text. It'll be drawing out different things in all of us. It's really such a unique experience.
It really is.
Communal experience.
Yeah, it really is. It's quite... Yeah, more than many art forms, it's quite communal. It's just by nature. Like it has to be, No, it's fascinating. And like I'm just wondering about the different, like we're talking about the power of living in community. Now, let's take the word living suddenly, right? Like the different kinds of connotations to that. You could be physically living with people in community, living with them, or living near them, let's say. we could also, we could mean living in community, meaning you don't live with them or you're not near them, but you're on the journey of life together and you meet regularly. So you're living in community, but you're just not physically living in the community with them. So it's important to distinguish those out. And I think we could definitely talk about that. The different kinds of living in community, the different ways it's lived out. And I'll start by just saying the best feeling I ever had of being in community. And again, I've been in many and in different uses of that word, was definitely working at a summer camp, because we were eating together, playing together, working together, living together, but also had common goals and priorities and values. And so, this combination of work, play, and live together was so invigorating. And you make good relationships really quickly. Like it was interesting how those relationships form and how they last, some of them throughout life. Like I, to this day, have those relationships because, I don't know, the bonding was just so intense because you're living there in proximity with them, eating with them, working with them, playing with them. It was just incredible. It far exceeds any other experience of community I've ever had. And that says a lot. That's great. That's awesome. That's crazy. So what about you guys? Like, what are some examples that you have of either living in a community or living in community? Yeah. You are listening to Telling the Story, a podcast dedicated to exploring faith, spirituality, arts, and culture, hosted by Ninth Hour Theatre Company in Ottawa, Canada. We'll return in a moment with the rest of our discussion.
Ninth Hour Theatre Company presents Beauty Will Save the World, a brand new musical audio drama for the whole family. Embark on a seafaring adventure and thought-provoking cautionary tale about the importance of passing on beauty to the younger generation, where relationships once lost are found again, when tested to choose what they stand for and who they will stand with.
Beauty will save the world! I've felt it! I've lived it!
Laughter, action, and tears, reminding us about the sacred things that make life worth living. To listen to full episodes or exclusive behind-the-scenes content, go to beautywillsavetheworld.ca.
I want to more than just survive. I want to hope and feel alive. I want to live, truly live.
beautywillsavetheworld.ca.
And now, back to the discussion. What about you guys? Like, what are some examples that you have of either living in a community or living in community? Yeah.
Well, I can go first.
Yeah.
First of all, we live in a community, a physical location. So I grew up in British Columbia. Most of that time was in Kamloops, BC. And I'm 70 now. I look back on that time and I'm in awe and wonder of how much that place and the people that I was dependent on at the time, my family and my friends and the community around me, how much it formed me.
Right.
You know, there's that combination of nature plus nurture, right? And we're nurtured by the community around us in many different ways. And it was largely a very positive experience.
And you don't choose that.
No, you don't choose it.
Yeah.
When you're a kid, you don't have a choice, basically, unless you run away from home,
right?
Which I wasn't inclined to do because I was enjoying it. So it was transformative in that sense, in the sense that it forms us. You know, community around us forms us when we're growing up. And then we either grow with that or we rebel against it, right? So one of the ways that I rebelled against it is that I got involved with a theater community in my early 20s that for an extended period of time, for about 10 years. And besides theater, which was almost secondary to the common interests that we shared, we were all committed to undergoing a very strict kind of therapy to unravel our family of origin issues.
Wow.
And
10 years.
10 years. And so we were part of a theater community. The leader of the community, my mentor, he was a theater director and he ran a theater program at various schools. I met him at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. and ended up with him when he was running a theater program in Northern Australia. And so I was involved in theater all that time.
Oh, okay.
You know, I served on his board. I taught in a class in one of his programs, and we talked about theater all the time. We read plays, we talked about them. But basically, there was a core group of us, it varied at times from 6 to 8 people that were committed to doing our therapy, to unraveling our family of origin issues, and a commitment to become healthier, more integrated, more whole as individuals and people. So there was a lot of ironing out of relationship issues, because that's where your stuff comes up.
Oh yeah,
right?
oh yeah.
Is in relationships.
How often did you meet? Like meet up? Or?
Well, we met basically almost every day. I'm sure. And we didn't live in the same houses or anything.
No,
we didn't even live in the same parts of town.
Okay.
But we had a commitment to be together and
every day.
Wow.
Yeah, we did
almost every day.
Almost every day.
You must have liked each other.
So we were either working on a production, or we were doing therapy workshops, or we were doing drama therapy with each other.
Wow.
Or we were just socializing with each other.
Okay.
So it might be as simple as dropping in for a cup of tea, where the 5 or 6 of us would just review what we had done during the day, what's on our mind, what our plans were, or we'd be involved in one of these other intensive activities. But that went on for 10 years. So you can imagine the level of intimacy that developed with this group of core 7 people. And then, of course, every semester, there would be new students coming through these programs. So we'd be exposed to all these different personalities and people who had varying degrees of interest in what we were doing on the therapeutic side of things.
Yeah,
they came because of the theater, but it's pretty magnetic to hear people talking about their family of origin issues and how they're resolving them, right?
Yeah.
So some people would stick around for a few years. Some people would run away at the first exposure to this kind of activity. But it was a very transformative experience for me. It completely changed my life.
Was it a formal commitment to one another or an organic
Well, it's
thing?
not formal in the sense that nobody was signing contracts.
Okay. But a formal, like a bit of an intention though, like we are going to commit to each other. It's not organic.
I like you. I respect you. I love you. And I'm here to support you as you go through these very difficult things. And people went through very difficult things. Wow. As I'm sure you can appreciate as a counselor and a therapist.
Yeah. Wow.
So, when you share that when you share the deepest secrets of people's lives with both the good things and the bad things that have happened to them, it creates a bond that runs very, very deep.
Wow.
You said that it was transformative. Can I ask, what impact did that have on you, do you think, living in such an vulnerable, intensive community for a decade? What do you think the impact was?
I think the impact is largely that it opens you up to the complexity of people and the world around you, and it makes you stronger to deal with it. It builds a strength, a resilience, an awareness, a knowledge that I never would have got otherwise, I'm sure. Strictly through, book education or university education. Yeah. It's just a different kind of way of knowing the world, of approaching the world. Wow. So that was a very intensive experience of community. So there's another one I want to talk about, but I'll turn it over
that's incredible,
KELTIE
George.
now.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, what about you, KELTIE?
And feel free to ask me questions about it as we go through.
Yeah, I'm so curious about it, because I will share about my experiences in community, but what I think you've highlighted there is the power of living community is if it's a safe community that you are free to be vulnerable in. And my assumption is that if you're free to be vulnerable in a community, you're being vulnerable and you're being accepted and received lovingly and not with judgment or rejection. That is so powerful, more powerful than some therapies, right? To live vulnerably and consistently, and to love and accept one another, and to mirror back, one another.
Reciprocal sort of.
And I think, KELTIE, the other thing I'd want to emphasize is the support, the ongoing support. So I can remember times when I would wake up in the middle of the night from a bad dream that had been triggered by some therapeutic work I'd done that day. And I could get on the phone and call my mentors, call somebody else in the group and say, this is what's happening in my body right now and in my mind. What do you think's going on? Can you help me process this? Or I could go over the next day for tea, or we would do a separate session just with myself so that I could work on go to the next level with this particular issue I was trying to resolve.
Wow.
Having that support in very real practical terms was for me very transformative.
Yeah.
And
it was the most profound part of it.
Yeah.
And
that you were loved and cared for as you went through these very difficult, painful experiences.
And that love and care through the difficult and painful experiences is steadfast and consistent. 10 years.
Yeah, and it's grounded
really
in
profound.
It's grounded in theory and in empirical evidence and a body of work and experience that's been around for a long time.
Was theater one of the tools used, or was theater incidental to like not really connected to the therapy aspect of this group, or was theater very much involved in the therapy, if you know what I mean?
Well, there's certainly theater exercises were, especially expressive exercises, right? Or sometimes if you were having trouble, for example, articulating a certain issue, then we might look for a piece of theater, like a scene from a famous play.
Sure.
For example, scenes from a marriage, Ingmar Bergman's play, and act out that scene as a way to trigger an issue that you were trying to resolve.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yes, I would say that theater mechanisms, theater exercises, theater theory was involved in the therapy. Yeah.
And you went on later in your life to do drama therapy with groups and individuals, correct?
Here in Ottawa.
It's pretty impressive. I wish it was more popular in a sense as we all know, having partaken in physical ensemble theater, how there is an aspect to it that is therapeutic in so many ways. But we're not intentionally trying to be therapeutic, but there's aspects to where you get from it. I can only imagine if there was an intentionality and a follow up and a support, and your theater's involved in getting to the root of someone's issues. Yeah, that would be so fascinating and powerful. Yeah.
And one of the things I like about theater is, as you know, with therapy, what you're doing is resolving issues because you're acting inappropriately in the present in a way that would have been appropriate in the past.
Oh,
all right. So you see this in stories all the time, right? Storytelling is a lot about inappropriate behavior in the present that is rooted in a past conflict or a past issue or whatever. And we see that, of course, in Babette's Feast, right?
Right.
With the resolution between the paramours, the relationships between the sisters that they had with the two men that courted them.
Right.
And it's very profound and deeply moving. I was so moved by the story, how it was unrequited love, right? They just couldn't get to that point where they could even kiss each other, and how painful that must have been for these men and these women who had such a strong desire, perhaps even lust for each other, and they couldn't consummate it.
Right.
The pain of holding back on that, withdrawing that, living with that for the rest of your life. It just gives me shivers.
I'll add, just as Martine for her love interest, General Lawrence Lowenheim, it's the reason is he's in this community. He tries to get to where she is, and he finds himself, it says in the text, insignificant and contemptible. And that gets in his way of being able to embrace joining her world, and she can't join his because that's his world is so hedonistic and sinful. It is such a shame. There's so much shame between the two of them and fear, and it gets in their way. And eventually he says, I'm going away forever.
Yeah, and just the pain of that.
Yeah.
It's relatable, right? It's a relatable thing.
Relatable.
Yeah. What about you, Keltie? You're any experience you have living in community, or being part of a community, or living in community?
Living in community. I did live in residence at a college for a year, so that would probably be my most significant time living in community. And then throughout university, I've always had roommates. I think it is different, though, than living in community that says we're in it for the long haul, because there is sort of, you sort of know that from September to May, you'll be living together and then you'll move on, or maybe you'll choose to move in with one another, depending on how this goes.
Right.
And that was really important for me, actually, to live with people. I do have siblings. I have 3 siblings, but it's different when you're living with people who aren't your relatives, and you bring all of your blind spots. They're bringing all of their blind spots, and then you're forced to live in community with one another. Things like the expectations I have for how a home should look, and my roommate's expectations for how a home should look often are not the same expectation. And so then you have conflict. And then that forces you to have conflict with someone. And if you
we
fear
are a conflict avoidant society.
We are conflict avoidant. Conflict.
At least in the real world, maybe not online.
Yeah. Yes. Face to face.
Yes.
We don't like conflict. And so you learn, okay, someone is coming in with a different lived experience than me, and I'm not okay with that. Do I communicate that, or do I hold it inside and allow resentment or bitterness to fester? Or maybe actually I'm not okay with it, but it's not that big a deal. I can set it aside. You know, I think living in community forces you to do that. And if you can disagree safely, resolve conflict well, and continue forward in forgiveness, that is a really important part of community. Also, my roommates probably saw the worst version of me ever more than any other friends.
I can't even picture it.
Let me tell you, it exists. And that's vulnerable, right? Showing a person, these are all of my flaws, and I can't, keep the honeymoon phase is over. I'm 19. I can't be the version of friend that maybe you see when we're hanging out together and we're not living with one another. So you see me, you see the dark parts of me. Can you accept that? It's similar to, I'm sure, what you would have experienced in your community, your theater community. And then what do you do if your friend doesn't accept that and you do feel rejected? That's painful. That's something to process. But it's so powerful when a friend does see the worst parts of you and does accept it and love you and walk through those things with you. Walk next to you when you're going through those things. So roommates in university was probably my most significant experience of living, actually living, sharing a kitchen. Right. I had I didn't have my own room, sharing a room with someone.
Oh yeah.
Now, I do live in community. My husband and I actually have a roommate. But I would say community is more, we have friends that are really important to us. My family is really important to me, and, showing up for one another, has been, the way we embody community. I think specifically, actually, some of my best friends have had babies this year. Actually, the community that we're a part of
is
in Ottawa, there are 7 new babies.
Oh, wow.
7 this year from February to
unlike
to
the community
November.
in Babette's feast.
Unlike yes. Conversely.
Well, you brought up something important there that we haven't quite touched upon, which I think we need to, about community. And I think we live in a profoundly individualistic society, and it's getting more so as I get older. I'm noticing as well the reluctance, the complete reluctance to have to rely on someone else for anything. And I think it's disastrous for us as people, as a community, as a country, as anything. And you brought up a great point that your community, the people in your life, you guys show up for one another in need. Yeah, we try, right? Exactly. But I find that my observations are that people are very hesitant to want to express need because I guess they're afraid of bothering someone, or perhaps getting that need rejected, like the person doesn't meet the need. And then conversely, I think a lot of people don't want to be needed. So, so that's also true. I think there's 2 types of people where it's or even the need of I'm having this social issue, I need help, you're expressing pain maybe even, and people, they sometimes don't want to be burdened with that. And so so it's I don't want to live in community because I don't want to deal with people's stuff, and I don't want to share anything, and I don't want to have to rely on them for anything whatsoever. And I want my own this and my own that, my own that. And it's challenging to overcome these barriers of we do think we're better off if we're individualistic and don't need anybody, but I don't see the evidence in that. I see people are happier when there's people in their life that they can rely on, and that people that are relying on them. What do you guys think? Yeah.
I feel all of that has to do with risk and risking emotional discomfort and not feeling that the risk is worth the potential of experiencing emotional discomfort. Living individually or individualistically, there can be, I do want to nuance this, something more emotionally comfortable. Because if you don't need anyone, then maybe you're not a burden to anyone. If you don't need anyone, then you're not powerless to needing people. And I think that as our world becomes more and more individualistic, I do also see there's a correlation between that and like our tolerance for emotional discomfort is going down.
It's going way down. Yeah.
It's vulnerable to need someone. It's vulnerable to be open with someone. It's vulnerable to risk rejection. It's vulnerable to risk failure. And I mean, I think that the individualistic culture ultimately is self-preservational because we fear emotional discomfort. That's what I see. I don't know about you, George.
Yeah, I maybe I'll frame this in my experience with a countercultural movement towards this individualism, this radical individualism that dominates our society or characterizes our postmodern society. Is I got involved in a intentional community venture called co-housing in Perth,
which originated in Denmark. No,
that's right.
Co-housing.
Yeah,
co-housing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Denmark is one of the few countries in the world where it's quite successful, largely because it's supported by the government.
What is
to a great
it, George?
extent.
What's co-housing?
Co-housing is it's an intentional community where a group of people get together with the intention of living together in a shared space. So co-housing. And the idea is that you create that community from scratch and you design the physical space that you're going to live in and you create the rules that you're going to live together with. So I was part of a group that this was my third crack at it, but I got involved with a seniors co-housing community in Perth. They had just started about a year before my wife and I joined them. And it was a total of 11 households of seniors. Some were couples, some were single. And we had to find a plot of land where we could build 11 units and design the building and the shared space. So one of the principles of co-housing is that you have a common house or a common space where you make a commitment to eat together at least once a week and preferably every meal, so that you are purposely relating with each other. Okay. You have your own separate unit, your own separate condo, if you will, or apartment that is fully furnished. You have your own bathroom, your own kitchen.
I'm glad you clarified that because most people, when you say co-housing, they hear you lose your autonomy and you're sharing a bathroom with people. But that's not what you mean.
Yeah, and
you mean we're living in the same area. That we're living together intentionally.
In the same physical space. And it's not co-op housing either, which is a different concept as well.
Which also is beautiful in its own right.
Sure, but it's a different venture.
Yeah.
Okay. And co-housing, so it was a group of 11 households, people over the age of 60. My wife and I were the youngest couple, and this was about 8 years ago now. So we were the only couple under 65. Everybody else was quite a bit older. And it brings up this vulnerability issue because most of those people wanted to be in co-housing because they didn't want to be a burden on their children or a burden on society.
Right. Like in a long-term care home and
they didn't want to be alone. Right. Because when you're alone as a senior, you're very vulnerable, especially in times of illness, right? So part of the co-housing concept is that you have a guest house that you can, that your relatives can come and stay there. And, you have to schedule which relatives are coming. Or, for example, if one of you gets sick as a senior, you can bring in a caregiver for an extended period of time that can live in that guest house that has its own bathroom and kitchen and room to help care for the senior people. But the idea is that you share the facility, right? So you share cars. Not every household has to have a car. You don't need 11 lawnmowers. Okay.
Right.
You don't need 11 hammers or screwdrivers, right?
Yeah.
So
or shovels.
You design your life so that you are interdependent, right? You're dependent on each other and you're drawing on the resources of the community to live fully.
Right.
And
actually you save money because you all are sharing resources.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this was an exercise that went on for 2 years. Okay. So it's not like you're just buying a condo.
No.
You're creating a community together. You create the rules.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is very contentious because, like Keltie found out with her roommates at college, there's a different concept of what cleanliness is and what order is and what rules would work and what rules wouldn't work. Right. So that was very stimulating to get involved in these discussions on the rules of how we were going to live together. Anyways, the venture after 2 years, it folded because we had bought land and we were getting ready to build, and the builder that we had contracted with pulled out of the venture.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, it was a shame. And I can't tell you, even today, it's one of the deepest disappointments I've had in my life because my wife and I were so looking forward to moving to Perth and being part of this community that we helped create collaboratively, right? You get to know people by going through these issues, right? Yeah. And seniors aren't, people in their 20s like I was when I was doing therapy. They're set in their ways. They want things done a certain way, and it's not easy to compromise, right? The stakes are high. And I think that's another aspect of community that I've learned is that the higher the stakes, the more pressure there is to create community that works, right? So you can see why in certain military communities, there's a bond that lasts a lifetime because the stakes are so high. The person beside you could be responsible for you dying if they don't do their job right. Right. So same thing with the co-housing community is like we had people that were vulnerable. And if we didn't do things right, some of those people could get ill and die quickly. And in fact, that's what happened after the community folded. Within 1 year, 2 of the key residents in the community passed away. So it just shows you that there's a window, that these things are time bound, right? Yeah. Communities, like you said earlier, some last for a short time, some last for a long time. Yeah. There's a time boundedness that goes with it.
I really wish there was more of an appetite and government support, I suppose. Yes, you heard me say that. Well, like incentive, right, for co-housing, because I do think it is better than languishing away in a retirement home by yourself. It is better, especially an intergenerational co-housing community in which there's kids, there's young people, there's people that can lift things, there's people that can cook, there's people that can do this, they can do that, they can shovel the driveway, they can you're bonding, you're bringing all your gifts and assets to one community in which you live together and share things. If someone needs some support, the younger person can help. I personally want that kind of community. I don't like not being needed. I said to my friend who nearly broke her back shoveling snow after a giant snowstorm, next time call me, I live up the street. Don't even hesitate. My friend asked me to help her move the other day. I was delighted and honored to be asked to help her move. Like, it was an honor, actually. Like, I felt like, yes, I get to be a good friend. Like, it's like an honor to fulfill being a good friend.
I think, again, it goes back to this intimacy thing, right? There's something transcendent about, in the same way that sort of God gets under our skin, other people can get under our skin. And there's something transcendent and beautiful about that. And we see in the play Babette's Feast how Babette inserts herself into the community and gets under people's skin and makes their lives better. Right? Like they look forward to her coming to the marketplace and negotiating for the bread and the fish that she's buying. She brings some
spice to their lives, literally and figuratively.
They're all better people for her presence. And I think that's how I looked at the co-housing. Like, I've got a much higher appreciation of seniors now than I did before I got involved in that exercise, in that intentional community venture, because I saw how many resources these people had, how smart they were, how well they understood certain things like finances and land management and regulations that go with building a house and all this kind of stuff. Wow. It was just wonderful to be a part of that.
I could see your passion for it. Yeah. It's so
it was true. One of the most positive experiences of my life.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thanks for sharing that, George, as well. Like, again, the goal here was just, to talk about the different ways of community. And I love how we've had some great examples of that. And you guys, it was just such a wonderful conversation. And maybe I just want to give you an opportunity to give some sort of closing remarks. What would you want to leave the listeners with? Maybe we'll start with you, Keltie. What's some final thoughts you have on the power of living in community?
I think maybe one thing that is on my mind right now is for anyone who's listening and is feeling they've never actually felt a part of a community. I really empathize with that, and I understand how painful it would be, and it must be. I have felt lonely lots of times in my life, but I do believe that there are people out there for everyone, and living in community is not always comfortable. Some people have been really hurt by communities, religious communities, family. I think we didn't even talk about family, but family is a community in and of itself, and finding other communities is worth it, and it's vulnerable, and there are risks, right? Risk of rejection, risk of discomfort, but keep trying and live in community. It is so worth it. The vulnerability and the scariness of it and the risk, I do think in the end is worth it. It enriches life. And tying us back to something we were talking about at the beginning of this discussion is even the hard parts, they foster resilience. And I think that's worth it as well. So.
Well said. Thanks, Keltie. And you reminded me too, like the UK had a minister of loneliness at one point. And I remember oh, that's weird. That's odd and stuff. But I really think we should bring that back. And I think there should be people dedicated to not solving, but helping in the area of people being less lonely and less just in a crippling, languishing state, right? Of being not part of community or not seen, not cared for. So I think that it'd be great if we could as a community spend some resources on that, and maybe there could be less social problems as a result of such a intention, I could say. So what about you, George? Some final thoughts for the people listening?
I think I'd like to leave people with this notion, if you're part of a community, no matter how narrow the common interest might be, like a sports community, for example, right? I want to encourage people to keep your eyes on the margins of the community, look for people and activities that you might exclude at first glance, but give them a chance, give them a second look. I like to play basketball on Saturday mornings, and I've been playing with the same group of guys for 30 years. And I'd like to say to them, I've never said this to them, but hey, have a look at Ninth Hour, have a look at theater, look at outside the edges of sports, other communal activities that might have something to offer you, that might enrich or enlarge your experience of sports, for example.
Well said. That's great. That is something worth thinking about. Yeah, if you're in a community or leading a community in any way, just like who are the people that perhaps are a little unusual, perhaps even in their interests or the way they are, and treat that as enriching to your community, and you'd be impoverished without them in a sense. And I like that, around the edges. Look out at the edges, not always in the center and stuff. Thanks, George. That's beautifully said. Yeah, so I was joined today by George Dutch, Associate Artistic Director of Ninth Hour Theatre Company, and KELTIE NEWMARCH, performing artist in Babette's Feast, playing at the Gladstone Theatre in November 2025. This has been Telling the Story, a podcast dedicated to exploring faith, spirituality, arts, and culture, hosted by Ninth Hour Theatre Company in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for joining us for our podcast series discussing the themes and ideas expressed in the story of Babette's Feast. You can listen again to this and all our podcasts through YouTube, Spotify, and directly on our website, ninthhour.ca. Be sure to follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter to be the first to receive exciting announcements, opportunities, and behind-the-scenes content. We hope you'll join us again on Telling the Story.